Welcome to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharan Raghavan.
Okay, Sharan, this is our 50th episode.
Yes.
And we decided that we will make it special by hosting somebody whom our listeners would really, really love to interact with, love to hear from. I think we've met our objective. What do you think?
I think so. I think the 50th episode required somebody special, mark the occasion, and we have him right here.
Excellent. So, without further ado, let me introduce our guest for today. It is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Anil Viswanathan. Anil is dear to us personally as well as professionally. Both Sharan and I have worked with him in the past. I have personally reported to Anil in multiple capacities. He was my first guide when I did my very first stint in Cadbury, when then Anil was a marketing manager, and then I moved around in various parts of country before coming back to marketing. And again, I was reporting into Anil, and I owe quite a bit of what I learned, how I grew, etc., my outlook towards marketing and life to Anil, and we will talk a little bit more about that. Apart from obviously a little bit of job on mentoring me and people like me, Anil has done really well for himself. We will talk to him and get to know his background, etc., a bit. But just to brief you guys, he's through and through been with Cadbury, Kraft, Mondelez. He's a career Mondelez guy. Currently, he's heading the business for Mondelez Vietnam. Just before this, he was the CMO for Mondelez India business. And to his credit, are so many incredible and celebrated campaigns. I don't think we will be able to talk about each one of them today, and if we do, we'll possibly be recording 2 or 3 episodes at one length, but we'll try and do justice to that as far as we can. So rather than spoiling the introduction by going on and on about it, I will let Anil do the talking to all of you. Welcome to the podcast, Anil.
Thank you, Sudeep. Thank you, Sharan. Happy to be here. Thank you for embarrassing me enough.
We're just getting started, though.
No, I think, Anil, all of that is richly deserved, and our listeners will get to understand why I say so. But thank you for joining in from Vietnam. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate a lot.
It's my pleasure.
So now, Anil, just to start things off, if you could just give our listeners a little bit of a brief of your professional journey thus far, and then we will dive deeper into some of the aspects there.
I think you mentioned it quite succinctly yourself, Sudeep. So I've been a career Cadbury Kraft Mondelez employee, as you said. It's been a wonderful career in this organization. As I like saying it, joined from campus and haven't found reason to quit yet. The other thing is the fact that I didn't have to change companies. My company changed twice over. So it does feel like there were 3 different companies there, Cadbury and then Kraft and then now Mondelez. Interestingly, since the brands have remained the same, the core ethos of the company has remained the same. The brands are such that they permeate the culture of the organization. And hence a lot of what we experienced early on in Cadbury continues to be some of the core values or the core aspects of the company culture. So it's in a sense remained the same and yet seemed like 3 different companies as well. So it's been an interesting journey. My career is a typical cliched, stereotypical commercial career of sales, marketing and a few other stints in between. As you all know now, a well-tested way of building a commercial career, of starting in sales, doing the relevant hard yards of selling candy and then moving on from there to into marketing, going through the ropes of basics of marketing and moving from one portfolio to the other, gaining more and more perspective, complexity, managing more complex businesses. And then, of course, a few interesting stints in between as well. One of those interesting stints was a stint in strategy. At that point in time, I didn't know why I was getting chosen for it. I really didn't feel like I needed to be chosen for it. But it played a very interesting role. It also provided me the opportunity to do something interesting. Then we got acquired in 2010 by Kraft. Getting things going and setting up the biscuits business in Mondelez was interesting. After that, I had an opportunity to work in the global marketing organization, did global innovation. Then came back, ran marketing for India in different capacities, and then kind of the end-to-end classic marketing that you've seen right in the past. Then at the end of my kind of marketing journey, felt that I had kind of reached a logical conclusion in terms of from a function standpoint, and then I thought I should experience general management, and that's where and now find myself in my capacity as running the end-to-end business for Vietnam. So that's been my journey. In the journey has been, as I said, 3 different companies, different business models, different org models, global, regional, local, and going through the pendulum of being a global organization, a local organization, and all of that. And all of that has helped kind of build a lot of perspective, work with great people, different types of people, different types of org structures, and just kind of helped me constantly learn and understand and build brands and businesses. So that's been my kind of journey from a professional perspective.
Anil, you've been in the system for over 20 years, right? And not every year can be good, even if you're Anil Viswanathan. What keeps you rooted and so hooked on to the culture and the company and the brands, despite the ups and downs? Because I, for one, feel when the ups and downs happen is when your core gets shaken a little bit, and you kind of, that's when movements usually happen. So
Yeah.
what exactly kept you hooked?
Good question. I think maybe one thing that's happened to me has been Sharan, that I've failed early in many of my stints. So very early on in my sales career, I would definitely say, not great experiences, or where I didn't deliver on my expectations. And so very early on, I experienced failure. And what I also experienced through that failure is that I could learn, and I had the space to build on my failure, use that to learn and get better. And I feel that in our organization, at least I experienced this journey myself, that failure leads to stagnation, or failure leads to a repercussion that reflects on career choices getting limited, or opportunities not coming, or you're not you're being identified as a person who cannot deliver. Then those become the kind of challenges. For whatever reason, I think things have worked out for me, where I was able to use those failures to demonstrate that I can learn from them, and then eventually, in the course of my stint, or in the course of the subsequent stints, demonstrate that I've come out stronger. And it's just nice that I was in an organization and with set of leaders who had created that culture, where it didn't feel as if it was the end of the road anytime I failed. And of course, failures would also mean that in the year I would not be rated as well as my peers, or as well as I would have wanted to be in my internal benchmarks. And over a period of time, that businesses go through cycles. So you do know that if you're going through that cycle, as an individual also, you will go through those cycles. Maybe because I experienced it early, and it didn't impact me from a career perspective, I didn't have to worry about that too much. So I think possibly that's the reason why it is held back. And I think the other interesting thing that I've seen, Sharan, is that sometimes, especially in tough business cycles, there's lots to learn. And especially when it comes to marketing. Marketing is such that, or brand building is such that when things are working, it's very difficult to isolate what's working and what's not. And you tend to feel complacent about the fact that everything's working, or whatever you're doing is driving the business results.
Right.
It's when business cycles are tough, you get a perspective on what do we need to change, or what needs to change, what else needs to be done to recover. And it's as much brands and marketing as it is business, right? Over a period of time, what differentiates good and great people, or good and great individuals, is those who are able to carry those learnings when things were down. Those are the two things that I like to say.
It's quite nice. I think the fact that you kept this learning attitude despite failure, recognizing the cyclicity of business cycles, and then belief in the culture and the leaders of the organization. Those are things I think which should possibly be a reflection point for not just us, but for our listeners as well, in how you shape your career, how you think about various instances in your life, and how you choose the right set of company and leaders to work with.
Correct. And I mean, of course, this is all the power of hindsight, right? At that point in time, you
Yeah.
feel like shit, right? So, I mean, it's not as if it was a wonderful time, and, I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it and all of that. So,
Yeah.
nothing. It was tough. And really, it's not as if you put on a learning button and say, okay, start learning. I mean, that's the only way to survive, right? You have to do
Correct.
something different, right? So, it was as much survival as against, it's not as if, one has something, it's like an ammunition that you're taking it out. You're battling for survival, and thankfully results followed, right? Which then shows everything is in demonstration, right? Would you say that, okay, the change has happened? That's how, with the power of hindsight, you can say it. I mean, so the lesson we can take, as you're saying, is the fact that there could be a way out, and it does not necessarily have to be an end of the road.
Correct.
Especially in a country where there's opportunities abound everywhere, and one tends to feel that, okay, why should I slow down when I can continue to move elsewhere and move fast enough? The slowing down has an important learning that if you don't gather, at some point in time, you will face it, and it'll come as a challenge.
And while you're calling it hindsight, in the moment it would have required a lot of pragmatism. Where does that come from, though?
I don't know what you mean by pragmatism. I think it's more about possibly. I think that's what possibly kind of the our educational background or training has told us. So I've done engineering, right? So from an engineering standpoint, from that kind of perspective, you have an analytical mindset. You are in problem solving. So the pragmatism that you talk about is more about saying that okay, it's about a problem that you are in. Let's try and solve the problem in different ways. So I think it's also a skill set that we gather to say okay, let's try and figure out something. Let's try something. It's not okay. Something has not worked. Let's try something else.
What we should also highlight, Sharan, is that for the listeners who are planning their career, who are at the start of their career, it is important to understand that when Anil talks about his cycles and all of the learning, the context also is that, like he said, company changed a couple of times.
Right,
That results into some kind of cultural ups and downs.
right,
And even because we know the company, the marketing structure or the way it was structured, the way function was structured also changed number of times.
right.
Country versus region, BU, etc., etc. So therefore, sometimes it would lead you to say, okay, I can't even think of what I want to be 5 years, 10 years down the line because the position is changing. So put all of that in context, and therefore it becomes even more critical, while it is hindsight. But for people who are planning their career, it is a great advice to not really get stuck on to one particular path. You will feel slow and fast at different points in time. And like Anil says, that there is tremendous amount of learning to be had when you're feeling stuck or when you're slow, which you would otherwise need to get. So don't change lanes immediately. Try to get the learning and then possibly see whether it puts you on the fast path or not.
I think that's an interesting point, right? I mean, we are now, thanks to what's happening around us and the whole private equity driven startup businesses that have come in and the cycles that they're also going through, their cycles are also fast and rapid. I think we now are more open about these conversations in India than we were in the past. The moot point is that we now know that change is going to be there in the industry at times when there has been very limited change, both in terms of business prospect and in terms of structures, the way we are organized. I think what's important also to acknowledge today is that change is always good, whether it's organization change or strategy change or a business prospect change.
Right.
And I think change creates opportunity. Sameness or being in the same space, in the same business, in the same organization over a period of time in the same space means that naturally both learning slows down, opportunity slows.
Correct.
That's the other perspective to keep in mind, that quite often, I mean, especially now when there is a lot of change that's happening.
Correct.
Change can be unsettling if you have that perspective. Again, with the benefit of hindsight, that change can create opportunity. At that point in time, it may seem unsettling. I have gone through this personally as well, but I think with reflection creates opportunity, which is the right thing.
Excellent point. And now, Anil, maybe striding forward, when somebody looks at your career, it will seem like a marathon. Right time to possibly bring in the fact that Anil is also a marathon runner. He's somebody who not only has been running for a fairly long time, but has inspired a lot of people within Mondelez system to take up running or take up, fitness as a way of life. I have told this to him in the past, that I, for one, was obviously influenced by him. It was because he used to run that I took up running. Then I, went on this path, and it has completely changed quite a bit of my life and my morning routine for sure. So, Anil, a little bit about running. So, you have spoken about running quite a bit. You referred to it in a lot of your analogies. How do you think it has helped you? What can some of the younger guys take out from that?
Yeah, and I think on a lighter note, yeah, I was able to influence you, but unfortunately not your partner enough. So that remains a pet peeve. But it's a nice story. I think through college and through our schooling and college, I was quite active in sport to the extent that one of my closest friend also from college joined Cadbury, and both of us were very keen in sports. So the joke that used to be told is, you guys got through the sports quota. So we were quite active and used to play a lot, much more than we should have. And then work happened, and then sales happened, and then everything stopped. Through about 3 to 4 years that I was in sales, it just completely stopped. When you have a very active life and then you transit to a very sedentary life, and then, as luck would have it, fortunately or unfortunately, I was in Kerala, the land of brandy and toddy. So then, place that you socialize is typically in a bar in an evening. So then, what happens, right? So this completely, I became Sharan. So
You became a really wise person when you were in Kerala.
A moment of silence for Sharan.
till as much time, I mean, I tried a few things and tried to play and all of that. And when I moved to Bombay and still with my friends, just try and play. But once you get into corporate life and if you're getting into a team game, it always becomes a challenge to get people together, etc., etc. And as you age, you also realize that playing a little bit of casual sport on a weekend is not enough. So I was a I was a bit unhappy with where I was, and not necessarily the right lifestyle choices. And it's a nice story I like to tell that we used to work in Cadbury House, right? And you walk down from Cadbury House, the famous Haji Ali Juice Center. And one of those evenings, I was in Haji Ali Juice Center having it was post summer around June July. I was having this nice, a beautiful mango milkshake. Casual light snack, the sandwich and Ajili sandwich and mango milkshake. And I saw one guy running. And as he got closer, I was wondering, my God, running in the evening and what an into guy and all that. As he came closer and closer, I found it was a junior of mine from college.
Ah.
Very good friend, 3 years my junior. And as I saw him, I said, Baga, what are you doing? And it was August, right? July or August, right? Monsoon season as well. So I'm preparing for the marathon. I said, dude, you. And he said, what do you mean? Yeah, I mean, yeah. And I said, I'm super impressed. And then he said, yeah, why don't you also start? I mean, there's nothing, it's peaceful, you try. In college, in my engineering college, we have beautiful campus. There used to be a very nice road race, annual road race, a 8K road race. I never ever gathered the courage to run long distances. I used to run sprints in college. So I said, wow, man, dude, you are. So that kind of triggered something in my mind. And then that kind of started to say, okay, let me try. And then it started. And as luck would have it, at the right point in time, when I started running, I found some friends. I joined this group called Striders very early on in 2005. They were practicing in Mahalakshmi Race Course. That's it. I mean, they created the right environment. I attribute a lot of my initial days of building the confidence around running to a good colleague of ours that both of you know, Atul Bhatia. I keep telling him that he was my inspiration.
Yes.
He would never relent. One day session, if I would miss, he'll come to my room and say, "Kya ho gaya? Why did you miss?" Just created that rhythm. There's another guy called Sharat Gupta. I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
Neighbor. He was also a crazy fitness guy. He inspired me to shift from half marathon to full marathon. So I think that was a journey. It's an interesting journey. I think the thing is, when we don't have resources and time is crunched we keep moving, we need to find something that can be done easily. There are a lot of people who go to the gym. Somehow, because I've played always outside, I've never found the gym inspiring. So all things considered, with the resource constraints, running is something that then became an easy thing to do. And then once you're at it and you start liking it, there are things, I think 2-3 things that's really nice. It's a good way of exploring cities. Wherever you go early in the morning, it's a great way of getting a sense of what a city is. So to me, it becomes like a nice nice way of kind of exploring cities. It's also my way of starting my day well, because it gives me my moment of peace where I can switch off from all devices. I talk to myself there. I hear my voice. I plan for the day. My frustrations I take away. My doubts I talk to myself. The preparations I might need to do for the day I do. So that's my space. That's my private space. We get a lot of allows me to dissipate a lot of the negative energy and the concerns and fears. We also run busy lives. We have commitments from a family perspective for both our partner and our children. Again, this is one of those things that you can do. By the time you're home, the family is up, everything is sorted. You don't lose time, even if you're in a holiday. It doesn't come in the way of an activity. As anything else kind of then blocks out a lot of time. So it also worked out well in that sense. Especially kind of that between the 20s to 30s, mid 30s is the period, right? That all of us have active childhood right now. I mean, at least the generation that we belong to, the pre-digital generation that we used to belong to. So it's really in the 20 to 30s time when we kind of miss out, right? So this becomes a good alternative.
No, you're right. It seems to be one of those activities that a lot of the middle management and senior management in corporates definitely tend to take up. Seems to tick all the right boxes, and it seems to do well for a lot of people. Like you said, striders and groups like those, bringing all of those people together and them, holding each other accountable to everyday practice, and thereby letting you start the day well, giving you that private space for yourself, and then you start maybe realizing the benefits health wise as well as physical as well as mental health wise.
You're right, absolutely you're right. And I think, it's nothing to do with senior management, junior management, etc. I think it's more about, we can again have a much longer discussion. At some point in time, we had a nice leadership program. We were taught this notion of motivations, motives and values, and what drives people and the way they operate and the way they behave and the way they act. And from a motivation perspective, the whole point is that there's a whole notion of achievement orientation. There's another motive called affiliation, and then there's the motive called power. And There's this guy called David McClelland who's written the theory of motivation. So he says, and the theory says that there are only three motivations. And what happens in the journey of a career is when you're starting off, you're focused on achievement. And individual achievement, you're an individual contributor. How much you achieve and how well you achieve is what is important. And then over a period of time, you need to build affiliation and power. Affiliation allows you to connect and collaborate and work well with people because you then move into teams. And then power is really about influence, right? And power in a positive way, not in the negative way. And how you're able to influence others, right? And over a period of time, the journey in careers is moving from achievement towards power. So the whole notion is to say that you have to actively dial down your achievement orientation, because otherwise you keep jumping in and try and solve all problems yourself. You think of yourself as an individual contributor. The whole notion is how to dial down your achievement orientation and dial up your power motivation. And the only way to do that is find an achievement activity outside of work.
Nice.
And hence find an activity or find an initiative or find a hobby or find an interest where you can channel in your achievement orientation, because achievement orientation is innate. That's how you grow, right? You've grown doing that, excelling, performing, competing with others. Move that out and get that fill, get that adrenaline rush doing something outside of work. So you don't crave for that, and what you really crave for is affiliation and power. So that is a nice explanation of saying why do people pursue a set of activities beyond this, not about networking or being in the right places, etc., what it does to you. Different people take away different things, right? As you said, mental and physical fitness itself is a big thing. But the whole notion of bringing down achievement orientation at work by pursuing something outside work is a very nice way of thinking about it. And you
Nice.
pursue something which is where you're fighting with yourself.
Yeah.
That's other interesting thing about running, right? And people also talk about golf in the same way. It's all about versus yourself. So then you're not really bothered about others. And that's a good thing about running. Running is very democratic. Everybody supports each other. It's a very nice network to be in. You don't really compete. You find your level and you find your group and you push each other. So it's all about yourself. It's not that I am faster than you, or my PB is better than your PB. No, I mean it's all a lot of it is actually internal. Sorry, a little bit of gyan, but
Yeah. No. Beautifully said. And Sharan, because I noticed this on your face, PB is personal best.
Early in the morning, not very early, quite early in the morning, with both of you discussing PBs, I can only think of peanut butter for now. So,
I'm not surprised.
so if you can get back to marketing, I'll probably be able to satisfy a little bit of my hunger cravings at the moment with all the PB discussions going on.
No, I think before the last point that I wanted to touch upon with Anil before we get into marketing was that something that I also observed about Anil is that he's an organization man. So not only has he been a great marketer and he has led marketing teams, he has mentored a lot of marketers, but you also see him playing a lot of other roles within the organization. For example, Anil, saw you comparing the Cadbury Day once. Then you will also, find kind of conduct other activities. You're part of so many other initiatives apart from just marketing discussions, etc. So the one of the observations that us young brand managers used to have, that here is somebody who contributes to the organization much beyond their roles and responsibilities. While you might like to be humble and say that leaders are supposed to do that, very clearly amongst all of us, you were differentiated on that aspect vis-a-vis some of the other people who were around at that point in time. So talk a little bit about that. What led you to doing that? How do you think that helps you or the organization?
I think one of the values of our organization, I keep telling people and new joinees, etc., is that we do have deep down somewhere in the DNA of the organization this whole notion of an ownership mindset, and it goes way back to the roots of those days Cadbury, right? The Cadbury brothers had this notion: took a ship, go to the colony, and set up a factory, do what you need, and build a business there. It's kind of as core to the DNA of the organization. It permeates, and hence I think the feeling one has always had in the organization was that this is my organization. So here, and I can do what I think is what I want to do. And there's nothing right and wrong, right? Everybody, it's not as if somebody has this notion that I should do something more, and somebody else has the notion of I shouldn't do and I should do only this much because I get paid only so much. It's about everybody being comfortable of doing what they want to do. The intent saying this is my business and this is, I'm part of a larger piece. I think being part of a larger piece is something that has been a value in the organization. We've seen our leaders do it as well. So I think the broader leadership that we saw our leaders not purely play the role of functional leaders. saw them play the role of owners of the organization. Those days we used to call it MDC, then it changed into CLT, whatever you call it, the country leadership. At least what we experienced was always some people who were thinking about the organization and not just about their function. So we saw them do that, and we get influenced by our leaders. And I think that's been something that influenced me, brought that kind of a perspective, saying, okay, this interests me, this is something that I like doing, and there's an opportunity, let me contribute. Again, also fair amount of learning, right? Interacting with others from different functions, different backgrounds, different approach to the way they look at business. Then you get different perspective as well. I think that helps. And a lot of what we do is possible only if we get the support of others in our work. So it plays out. It also helps because you know the person and you know how they're thinking. So when it comes to getting them to align on something or to work with them on something, it becomes easier. So those are the two perspectives that kind of I think I'd like to share.
No, excellent. And in fact, one of the reasons this stays with me, and listen again, I want to give context to everything that I'm saying about you. And the context here is the first time I noticed this was when Anil was dressed in all white as Jitender, hosting one of the Cadbury days along with Mr. Yogesh Anand, who was dressed as Devanand. And then both of them putting that act up on the stage, comparing the event in front of the entire Cadbury team, is how you notice that, okay, you also as a young manager gets influenced, that this is how my managers are openly embracing everything that the organization does, leading the chart there, contributing wholeheartedly. So like you're saying, Anil, you got influenced by somebody, all of us were also looking at you, and that visual stays in my mind. And many years later, I have those pics with me. I don't think we will put it in show notes, but Anil was
Actually, not.
dressed as a jailer, asrani, saying आधे इधर जाओ आधे उधर जाओ बाकी मेरे पीछे आओ.
I
You
don't
remember
know.
that, Anil?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
With that little mustache. So, over the years, I've seen various avatars of Anil, and this was another one that fascinated me. And hence, I thought it'll be good to bring that up and, have people look at leaders, senior leaders from various facets, various lenses, and then realize that you don't become just a leader by being functionally good. Yeah, you contribute wholeheartedly to the organization, and that is how you get to lead the organization.
And while being comfortable with yourself, right? I think the
Yeah.
important thing is also not to try to do something for the sake of doing something. And we keep coming, and in this stage of my career, when people come and ask, or when we are giving feedback to teams, always this notion of, okay, but I am an introvert, and we are biased towards extroverts, and we are biased towards people who do these things, and I am an introvert and I'm not comfortable doing this, and does this mean that I'm not seen as an organization person, or not contributing? So it's important to caveat that we should not and must not be doing things to be seen a certain way. We have to be authentically ourselves, and the culture should permeate. The moment you impose, then you create a situation which is again the last thing you want is a extracurricular activity to also have a KPI, and performance pressure, right? You're doing something which is not related to your day job. You're doing something which is also equally fulfilling and makes it fun. If it isn't, then you shouldn't impose, right? I mean, that's the other thing that I've also reflected and realized that you do. And yes, there are certain things that need to be done, in which case you will be called upon. And yes, there will be an expectation that you contribute. Having said that, approaching it from a perspective of being authentic to yourself is also important.
Excellent. Good point. Good point. Thank you for doing that. I think many of our listeners would have possibly reflected this, saying, I am an introvert. Why do I need to necessarily do this? So, very well put. Thank you. Thank you for that, Anil. Okay. Now, Sharan, something that you've been eagerly awaiting.
Let's start the podcast. It's called Conversations on the Business of Brands for a reason. One thing I wanted to really ask you, Anil, you mentioned having worked across multiple markets, multiple geographies. Having been in the same company, you've worked predominantly around food and more snacking in particular. Do people change their attitude towards the category across different markets, or is it all one homogeneous world?
And it's interesting, right? I think it's interesting to think about this notion. There are similarities and there are differences. And
Okay.
then, depending on what your priorities are, you focus on the similarities and you focus on the differences. I think the similarities give you scale and the differences give you connect, local connect. I think my observation obviously is more closer to snacking, as you say. But I would hazard to say that beyond snacking also it will hold true. So when it comes to snacking, there's a very interesting notion, and many of the snacking companies will be doing it, so it's no longer patented information. This is a notion called demand spaces. You guys will remember Pathfinder, and we had this whole segmentation frame, which is kind of paint the universe of snacking, right? Any form of segmentation you will notice is no longer a simple needs framework. It is a combination of needs, occasions, context, etc., etc. So at a broad level in snacking, this is notion of demand spaces. That through the time of the day, what do people need from the morning to the night? And the reality is, globally, you can have one single global demand space that explains snacking across the world. And snacking, anything that you eat between meals, including something to drink, a fruit, some yogurt, cereal, a snack bar, a chocolate, a biscuit, anything can be mapped onto a single demand space. The point is, where do you want to take the view and how much you want to go in? And as you go in, you obviously see differences, right? So I think that's the kind of at a broad level what I'd like to say. And hence, one of the things that large organizations will try and do is to look at the broad patterns, because that allows you to figure out swim lanes for your broad brand without getting too caught up in what do I stand for or what do I solve for in different countries, and then create something which is not clearly very disjointed into something which is more consistent and clear. So it's very easy and very nice then to create nice swim lanes for our brands. And then get into the local context. Okay, if it is about morning nourishment, what a consumer consumes in China might be very different from what a consumer consumes in the US or what a consumer consumes in India. And that obviously has a fundamental local cultural aspect to it.
Right.
But the need and the context remains the same. So I think that's kind of the broad point I'd like to say, Sharan.
And the question also was a little loaded, because I see a lot of the healthy foods and the healthy snacking concept come up a lot from the West. And when you look at per capita consumption of even the unhealthy foods, the West kind of tops the list. So what's your take on healthy snacking at all, Anil? Is it an oxymoron? I don't believe it exists.
I think it's interesting, right? And this possibly played an official role where I have to speak to the media as well. In the preparation note is possibly the most prepared question, right? But I think at a fundamental level, and hence a lot of education has happened in this area. I think the fundamental 2-3 things. Go back to the facts. And what are we here for? We are here in the service of the consumer and serve what the consumer wants. So hence, know what the consumer wants and serve what the consumer wants. So I keep going back to saying, what does the consumer want? So it doesn't matter what you and I define, and definitions, meaning. I mean, none of them have any relevance at all, and hence all of this conversation is irrelevant in the context of what the consumer wants.
Yeah.
So go back to what the consumer wants, and what does the consumer say? The single largest driver of snacking is taste.
Exactly.
Correct.
Right? At the simplest of notions, to say that the consumer will consume something for taste. He's coming in for the taste. And if you dilute the taste, he's not in it. The second fundamental thing is the consumer needs choice. So it is not for us to decide what the consumer wants. It's not for us or not for anybody to have a point of view saying this is good, this is bad. Sitting where you are providing a certain set of things that you are good at. That's your business. So either when you're starting up something, you choose to start up your business saying, okay, I believe in this and this is what I want to start. As part of a business, I know what my business is about. We have defined what our business is about. So my job is to ensure that we sell or we build the business of what the business has been defined to do. And in that context, serve the consumer what the consumer wants in the right way. So hence the second notion is choice.
Right.
Offer the consumer the choice. Now, in that choice, there are consumers choosing more healthier options. And there are some consumers who are choosing to reconcile this dilemma if it exists. I mean, fundamentally, there is this dilemma, right? Awareness has created this notion that, okay, I want to eat right. Right? I want to live right, I want to eat right. There's no two notions about it, right? And as we all know, it starts from awareness, then converts itself into attitude, and then converts itself into behavior. Some of them are aware, have not converted into an attitude. Some of them have an aware and have a very clear perspective, but yet not behaving different. To the example you said, Sharan. And there are some who have taken all three, who are very clear, right? You speak to many of our spouses when they give food to make a food choice for their kids. You see them in action, right? They think, okay, this is what I will not do. This is bad. This is very clear. I want to do this something, etc., etc. So I think we see all kinds of consumers. So we're driven by that, and hence, I mean, when you look at demand spaces, when you look at the data suggests that consumers want something which is tasty, and the consumers will use their choice to know what to consume when. I think that's the other notion, there's a lot of debate that's happening, right? And a lot of trigger videos and a lot of this social media conversations, etc., etc. This is good, that is bad. All of it almost seems to be originating from the fact that I know more than somebody else and somebody else doesn't know what they're doing. It is my job to build awareness, and these guys are cheating, these guys don't know, these guys are gullible. I think the notion is, the more you spend time in the business, you know that finally consumer is king. And when you say consumer is king, consumer knows. So we tend to be very take a point of view of saying, guys, I know more. The approach to take is, let the consumer decide. Who are we to say what is good, what is bad? Having said all of this, of course you need to create a roadmap to say, are we creating a portfolio that our children will eat? The kids of the future will eat. Right? And the future is shifting. Right? The three of us in a traditional festival 15 years back, what we used to eat. Likelihood that when we come to Ganpati, that's coming 3 weeks from now, we're going to eat something totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
That's reality, right? So our kids are also going to be eating something different. So you need to prepare yourself for the future. But as you're preparing yourself for the future, also, I think, be clear that we are in service of the consumer and we need to provide the choice and not really get into a point of view debate on what is good, what is bad. It's not for us to decide.
That's amazing. I think the way you framed it as awareness, attitudes, and behavior, I think that filter itself will, I think all the listeners will know very instinctively where they stand on any kind of consumer behavior. I think that's a very good articulation, and the aspect of choice for the consumer, and that's the whole job of marketing, right? That's a job. You need to provide choice to the consumers.
And it's gone beyond health, right? I mean, beyond health, as awareness is going to different aspects. And it's interesting, right? Health is being aware that I'm aware of myself and what impact, whatever inputs coming in, what it has on me. And then the next phase that our children are going through is whatever inputs that is coming, what impact it has on me and the world around me, right? And the moment you think about the world around me, things are getting even more complicated, right?
Yeah.
And again, once you get stuck in a point of view debate, there's no way out of this, right? And so many interesting areas where it is not very clear what the outcome is going to be or what is the likelihood. And obviously, some of this is also going to be influenced or driven by how much capital it attracts. But I'm talking about things like, alternate meats, plant-based meats, vegan, a lot of these things. And all of these are questions that keep coming, right? And how do you approach this? I think the simple thing is to approach it by saying choice. And then, of course, you're governed by your business logic. Some businesses might say, I want to try something, start small, build on it, and I'm okay. Some businesses say, no, I want to get into it only if it is scale. People make those choices.
Right.
But I think that's based on internal strategy and internal choices, depending on where the organization is, what its priorities are. But from a consumer standpoint, I think the approach we should take, that we are in service of the consumer and our job is to provide choice.
Excellent point. And I think, Anil, related question. One is, like you said, that our job is to provide better choices to the consumer and let consumer decide. Then there are brands that have, and especially this controversy erupted when Paul Polman took this stance that all brands have to have a purpose, at least in Unilever, and that purpose has to, take the face of something which is big, which is good, etc., etc. And just wanted to pick your brain on that. Do brands really need to have a purpose? What is your point of view? Do the brands really tie themselves up and start treating consumer as naive when you take a particular purpose led stand, that this is the purpose I stand for? Or can we just simplify and say that the brand's purpose is to provide consumer choices and earn profitably and do well for their stakeholders? There are two different ways of looking at this problem. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I think it's a nice one, right? And I think it all depends on framing and how much. A lot of it is also clickbait, right? So let's take the clickbait away. So when you say does a brand need to have a purpose, I mean, it's an odd question, right? I mean, what do you mean by a purpose, and what is the implication of that statement? You need to be clear, right? Finally, what do you say? I mean, you exist. Obviously, you need a reason to exist, right? And either you choose the reason or somebody else choose the reason. You'd like to be in control of your destiny, right? So you need to define what is the reason for you to exist. That is the simplest definition of purpose. Otherwise, today you are there, tomorrow you're not there, right? So anybody, and that's a simple thing, right? If somebody says I'm in the purpose of selling an affordable, made in India cell phone, right? when the going is hot, I fly, and today there's no Micromax anymore, right? So you need to decide. I mean, that for that period of time, maybe that was their purpose, to say, I wanted to make an affordable made in India phone. Fundamental is, obviously there has to be a purpose. Otherwise, what it means is that I'm there today, I may not be there tomorrow. As you finally look at the documentary history of organizations that have survived over a period of time, and in the context of organizations that have survived over a period of time, look at value of those organizations. And which are the organizations that have created value over a period of time? The reason they have created value is there is a reason why they exist. There is a reason why their products continue to offer a certain proposition. A lot is being written today about what is happening to GE. What has led to the disappearance of GE suddenly? What we all read 20 years back as the icon for what we need to follow, for how organizations need to be built. So it's interesting. It's obviously fundamentally, of course, there has to be a purpose. There's not even a debate. So when you're asking this question, you're obviously asking this question in the context of marketing, in the context of how marketers think about it, how they convert it. So let's isolate it. Of course, you need the purpose. Purpose is why a brand exists.
Yeah.
And I think what is interesting for me is, and the question is, what does that translate into? And then how do you leverage it? So I think there is no debate. We will all agree that the fact is what differentiates a brand from a product, a brand from a commodity, and what makes a brand unique and what makes a brand survive is that there is a reason for it to exist, and that reason is built in what it delivers to the consumer. And that can be defined as a reason to exist, and that can be defined as purpose. Now the point is, at what level do you want to play? That purpose can be a simple purpose of a simple benefit, that I cleans my hand and protects me, I don't have germs in my hands when I eat something. To say, okay, it makes me stay healthy, which is kind of beyond just that in that moment what it does to me, to overall how it makes me feel. To ladder up to say, no, I believe in a healthy society. Not only do I say that I need to stand for health in the context of that occasion when my hand is dirty, to saying that no, you should stay healthy, you should have a perspective that is that you need to be healthy. It's not just about me being healthy. I need to associate with brands with things that it's not just about my health that they care about, they want to care about the health of the society.
Yeah.
And they also believe that a healthy society is built by healthy children, so let me start with children. And that's the story of Lifebuoy. And what an interesting story, right? From what it was when we were kids, as a pure play functional value affordable soap for army men.
Yes.
To what it is today. It's a beautiful story, right? So I mean, where is the question? So there is no question at all. And where do you want to play? At what level do you want to leverage that purpose? Depends on what your life cycle is, depends on who you are, but it also depends on how ambitious you are. And it doesn't matter, you can start on one end and go to the other end, or you can and you can start at both ends of the spectrum. So large brands could possibly start on one end of the spectrum, where they're building their base by starting at the bottom of the brand ladder, as we call it. And there are founder brands who are created because they have a certain purpose in mind.
Do consumers care for the social impact of the products or the brands they buy?
See, you're jumping to social impact, right? So I think that comes at the end. It's not at the beginning. In some cases, it could come at the beginning. But I would say that the mistake we make is jump from purpose to social purpose. My purpose is not to, solve a world hunger.
Right.
My purpose might be to make people smile.
Exactly.
And I might believe that making people smile is important for me.
Sure.
Tiny things in our lives that can make things better. That's where it gets a bit misunderstood, to say, what does purpose mean? And I think the other thing is, as I said, it's the reason to exist for the brand. So it has to be intrinsic in what the brand does.
Right.
So the brand has to do something. There has to be efficacy in what the brand does. That is why the brand will exist. Because brand will say that this is the reason for me to exist. And believe me, because I'm telling you, this is why I can solve this problem for you. So that's the starting point. The social impact is the end. And as I said, the journey is over a period of time. The reason it could work is also because today, as we understand, right? I mean, over a period of time, yes, there is the Byron Sharp point of view in terms of how categories are built and how categories exist. But fundamentally also in the context of relationships. At some point in time, relationships exist because of a fundamental alignment of a philosophy. And at some point in time, it could be that you are relating to a certain philosophy and you are engaging with that philosophy. Whether that leads to a transaction or not is different. Right? And of course, you care for it. But when you ask Sharan, does it work? It could work, because it could work at a relationship level. That's how, when you think of a founder and what a founder does and starts his business, right? When you see it, observe it from a distance as a consumer, you may have a point of view on it or not, right? Suppose a friend of yours has started a business and you speak to him or her, right? And you understand how deeply they believe in it. it influences the way they've created those products. Now, if you associate with their philosophy, I mean, you definitely would want to say, okay, I would want to be part of your philosophy. Now, having done that, in order for the business to exist, you need to do a certain set of things in the way that exists. And that's where philosophy comes in the way the business needs to operate on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
But could a fundamental alignment happen? Of course, it could happen, and that's how relationships get built. And that's the other interesting thing, right? In a day and age today, where the linearity of relationship building has changed, you have to think about this notion holistically, and how do you build this relationship over a period of time? And again, as I said, doesn't matter where you start, as long as you all know that you exist in service of business.
Right.
And business is in service of the consumer. I mean, those two things don't change.
Yeah.
And with those two things at constant, you can start anywhere.
We hope you're really enjoying our conversation with the marketing marathoner, Anil Viswanathan. And we really wanted our 50th episode to be a special one. And we're sure this episode is definitely worth it.
I'm sure it is, Sharan. And our listeners would have anticipated by now. There's so much more that we have to talk with Anil. And therefore, we will continue this chat into the next episode also. So, to our listeners, please hang on and listen to the next episode where we go deeper into many concepts with Anil and see the marketing marathoner's journey ahead.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharan Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBcast.net.